It's a question that keeps people awake at night, because deep down, you felt it. That strange familiarity with someone you just met. That inexplicable pull toward people who hurt you in the same ways. That pattern you keep denying but can't escape. Sigmund Freud had an answer to this, and it wasn't comforting. According to him, love isn't a romantic coincidence. It's not fate bringing two souls together. For Freud, every love story is actually a sequel, the continuation of an unfinished story from your childhood. And that's why you keep gravitating toward the same types of people, the same mistakes, the same pain. You ask yourself, why do I always choose the wrong person? But while you're busy blaming bad luck or poor judgment, your unconscious is doing something far more deliberate. It's scanning the room, searching for someone familiar. Not someone new and exciting, someone old and recognizable. Someone who matches a template carved into your psyche before you could even speak. Freud put it bluntly, love is the most beautiful disguise for our repressed desires. Think about that for a moment. What if the butterflies you feel aren't about the future, but about the past? What if that instant connection isn't discovery, but recognition? What if you're not falling in love, you're falling back into an old pattern, dressed up in new clothing? This is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if Freud is right, then we're not as free as we think. We believe we're making conscious choices about who we love, who we trust, who we let into our hearts. But beneath that surface decision-making, there are invisible chains, forged in childhood, strengthened by repetition, tightening with every failed relationship. You keep choosing emotionally unavailable people? That's not bad luck. You suffocate partners who get too close? That's not just your personality. You fall hardest for people who can't fully love you back? That's not coincidence. According to Freud, it's compulsion. Your unconscious is trying to resolve something that happened decades ago, using people in your present as actors in a play they never auditioned for. So, are we truly free when we fall in love? Or are we prisoners of invisible scripts written before we had memories? Can we ever love someone for who they actually are? Or are we doomed to project our childhood onto everyone we meet? Today, we're diving into Freud's most disturbing and most real ideas about love. We're going to explore why your type isn't really your type, why chemistry might be a warning sign, why the relationships that feel most right are often the most wrong, and most importantly, whether you can ever break free from the patterns that keep breaking your heart. Because understanding the chain is the first step to breaking it. Let's begin. According to Freud, your conscious mind, the part of you that thinks it's making rational relationship choices, controls only about 10% of your behavior. The remaining 90%? That's governed by your unconscious, a vast warehouse of forgotten memories, repressed emotions, and childhood experiences you don't even remember having. Think about your last relationship. You probably told yourself you chose that person because they were kind, attractive, funny, or shared your values. But Freud would call that a rationalization, a story your conscious mind tells itself to make sense of decisions that were actually made in the dark basement of your psyche. Here's how it works. When you were a child, your brain was busy creating templates for love based on your earliest relationships. If your mother was emotionally unavailable, your unconscious learned that love means chasing someone who's always just out of reach. If your father was critical, your unconscious coded that disapproval as a sign of caring. These patterns became your blueprint for intimacy. Now, decades later, you walk into a room full of people. Your conscious mind sees a crowd, but your unconscious is scanning for someone who matches those early templates. And when it finds a match, someone who recreates the emotional atmosphere of your childhood, your body floods with chemicals that feel exactly like destiny. That electric attraction you feel, Freud would say it's recognition, not discovery. You're not meeting someone new, you're meeting someone familiar. And your unconscious is screaming, this person can finally help us resolve that unfinished business from childhood. Except they can't. They never can, because you're trying to heal an old wound with someone who's specifically designed to reopen it. This is why people who grew up with chaos often feel bored with stable partners. Their unconscious doesn't recognize safety as love. It only recognizes turbulence. The calm, healthy person feels wrong because they don't match the template. So you sabotage it or drift away, pulled back toward the familiar pain that your unconscious mistakes for home. Let's talk about Freud's most controversial theory, the one that makes everyone uncomfortable at dinner parties, the Oedipus Complex. Before you click away, hear this out, because whether you believe it literally or not, the underlying principle explains everything about why you're attracted to people who hurt you. Freud argued that your first experience of intense love wasn't with a romantic partner. It was with your opposite-sex parent. As a child, you desperately wanted their exclusive attention, their approval, their love. But you couldn't have it completely. There were siblings, the other parent, adult responsibilities that pulled them away. This created your first experience of longing, jealousy, and the aching pain of unrequited love. Now here's where it gets psychological. You never fully resolved those feelings. You just buried them. And according to Freud, those buried feelings become the prototype for every romantic relationship you'll ever have. You're unconsciously trying to recreate that first love experience, complete with all its frustration and impossibility. This is why unavailable people feel so magnetic. That married colleague who flirts but never commits? The person who's not ready for a relationship? The partner who keeps one foot out the door? They're recreating the exact dynamic you experienced with your first love object, someone you wanted desperately but could never fully have. Freud would say you're not attracted to unavailability despite it being painful. You're attracted to it because it's painful. Your unconscious recognizes the familiar ache of wanting someone you can't completely possess, and it mistakes that ache for love. The anxiety, the obsession, the constant wondering where you stand, that's not a bug in your relationship. For your unconscious, it's the main feature. Think about the relationships where someone was completely available, totally devoted, absolutely sure about you. Did they feel exciting, or did they feel flat, almost boring? That's your Oedipal pattern at work. Your unconscious learned that real love involves chasing, proving yourself, and never quite measuring up. Anything else doesn't compute as romance. Here's the kicker. This pattern repeats across genders and sexualities. Whether you're attracted to men, women, or anyone in between, Freud's core insight remains. We're all trying to resolve our first impossible love through our current impossible loves. Meet Sarah. She's dated 5 different people in the last decade. Different jobs, different looks, different backgrounds. But every single one ended the same way. They cheated, blamed her, and left her feeling worthless. "I just have bad luck," she tells her friends. But Freud would say something else entirely. She has repetition compulsion. This is one of Freud's most powerful concepts. Your unconscious doesn't just remember trauma, it actively seeks to recreate it. Not because you're masochistic or stupid, but because your psyche is desperately trying to master an experience it couldn't control the first time around. Here's the logic. When something painful happened in childhood, abandonment, betrayal, emotional neglect, you were powerless. A child can't fix their parents or change their circumstances. So your unconscious makes a deal with itself. I'll keep recreating this scenario until I finally get it right, until I finally win. That's why you keep dating emotionally distant people if your father was cold. You're unconsciously thinking, this time I'll be good enough to make them warm. This time I'll crack the code. But you never do. Because you're not actually dating that person, you're dating your father's ghost, and ghosts can't be changed. Freud observed this pattern obsessively in his patients. A woman whose mother abandoned her would marry men who inevitably left. A man whose father was violent would find himself in explosive relationships. Same story, different actors. The unconscious was directing the same play over and over, hoping for a different ending. The cruelest part? The repetition feels like hope. Each new relationship whispers, maybe this time will be different. And it is different, in superficial ways. But the core dynamic? Identical. You're not moving forward. You're running in place, trapped in a loop your unconscious refuses to break until it achieves the impossible, rewriting your childhood. Your unconscious has a whole arsenal of tricks to keep you from seeing the truth about your relationship patterns. Freud called these defense mechanisms, and they're the reason you keep making the same mistakes while genuinely believing this time is different. First, there's denial. Your friends see that your partner is manipulative, controlling, using you, but you don't see it. Not because you're blind, because seeing it would force you to confront painful truths about why you chose this person in the first place. Denial keeps you stuck in relationships long after their expiration date, insisting everything is fine while the house burns down around you. Then there's rationalization. This is where you create elaborate logical explanations for obviously emotional decisions. I stay because we have history together. I stay because they need me. I stay because leaving would be too complicated. But Freud would ask, who are you really trying to convince? The real reason you stay is unconscious, probably connected to old fears of abandonment or unworthiness. The rational explanations are just smokescreens. Projection is particularly insidious in romantic relationships. You accuse your partner of being distant when you're the one withdrawing. You criticize their commitment issues while refusing to fully commit yourself. Freud understood that we often hate in others what we can't accept in ourselves. That quality that drives you crazy in your partner? Look closer. You might be staring into a mirror. Sublimation takes your unacceptable desires and channels them into acceptable outlets. You can't admit you want to leave your relationship, so you pour obsessive energy into work, hobbies, anything to avoid intimacy. You're not staying present, you're running away while standing still. And perhaps most damaging, reaction formation. This is where you express the exact opposite of what you really feel. You become overly caring toward a partner you resent. You suffocate someone with affection when you actually want space. You act extremely jealous when you're the one emotionally checked out. These mechanisms work together to create an impenetrable wall between you and self-awareness. You're not consciously lying, you genuinely believe your defenses. That's what makes them so effective and so dangerous. Freud believed your psyche contains 3 warring factions, each pulling your romantic life in different directions. Understanding this internal battle explains why you feel so conflicted about the people you choose. The id is pure desire. It's the voice that screams, "I want them now," when you see someone attractive. It doesn't care about consequences, commitments, or compatibility. The id saw your toxic ex post a photo and immediately wanted to text them at 2 a.m. It's impulsive, primitive, and operates entirely on the pleasure principle. If relationships were run by the id alone, you'd chase every attraction, act on every impulse, and leave destruction in your wake. The superego is the opposite, your internalized moral compass, built from parents, society, and religious or cultural values. It's the voice telling you, good people don't feel this way, or you should stay in this relationship because you made a commitment. The superego doesn't care if you're happy, it cares if you're good. It would keep you in a dead relationship forever rather than face the selfish act of leaving. Caught between these extremes is the ego, your conscious, rational self desperately trying to negotiate. The ego wants to satisfy the id's desires while appeasing the superego's demands, all while dealing with external reality. It's an impossible job. And when the ego fails, that's when you make disastrous relationship choices. Here's how this plays out. Your id is attracted to someone emotionally unavailable and exciting. Your superego says you should choose someone stable and appropriate. Your ego tries to compromise by choosing someone who appears stable but has hidden chaos underneath. Congratulations, you've managed to disappoint all 3 parts of yourself simultaneously. Freud observed that people with an overactive superego often end up in passionless relationships, sacrificing desire on the altar of proprietide. People dominated by the id chase intensity until they crash and burn. And people whose ego is weak, they swing wildly between extremes, unable to mediate the internal war. The healthiest relationships, according to Freud, happen when these three forces reach equilibrium. But most of us are walking battlefields, our love lives casualties of an internal civil war we don't even know we're fighting. Freud's work laid the foundation for what we now call attachment theory, and it reveals something unsettling. By age 5, your romantic destiny was largely written. The way your parents responded to your needs as an infant created neural pathways that still dictate how you love today. If your mother responded consistently to your cries, fed you when hungry, comforted you when scared, your brain learned, I matter, my needs will be met, people are trustworthy. That's secure attachment, and it's the only pattern that leads to healthy adult relationships. But here's the problem, most people don't have it. If your caregiver was inconsistent, sometimes attentive, sometimes neglectful, you developed anxious attachment. Your nervous system learned, love is unreliable. I need to cling, chase, prove my worth constantly. Now, decades later, you're the person triple texting, analyzing every micro-expression, panicking when someone takes an hour to respond. You're not being crazy. You're being faithful to the pattern your infant brain encoded as, this is how love works. If your caregiver was cold, dismissive, or absent, you developed avoidant attachment. Your brain decided, needing people hurts. Independence is safety. Vulnerability is weakness. Today, you're the person who sabotages intimacy right when it gets deep, who feels suffocated by commitment, who mistakes emotional distance for strength. You tell yourself you're just independent, but Freud would say you're terrified. Then there's disorganized attachment, when your caregiver was both your source of comfort and your source of fear. Maybe they were loving when sober, terrifying when drunk. Your brain couldn't resolve the contradiction, so it created a pattern of chaos. Now you're attracted to people who confuse you, who swing between hot and cold, because that's what your nervous system recognizes as love. Here's what makes this truly tragic. You can't consciously remember the experiences that created these patterns. You were pre-verbal, sometimes just months old. But your body remembers, and it's steering your ship toward the same emotional waters where it first learned to swim or drown. Freud argued that everyone is neurotic to some degree. Neurosis isn't mental illness, it's the inevitable result of being human, of having desires that conflict with reality and rules. But here's the problem. Your specific neurosis is attracted to complementary neuroses in others, and that attraction feels like soulmate energy. Consider this common pattern. Someone with abandonment anxiety pairs with someone with engulfment anxiety. One person's desperate clinging triggers the other's desperate fleeing, which triggers more clinging, which triggers more fleeing. It's a perfectly synchronized dance of dysfunction, and both people will describe the relationship as having intense chemistry. That's because neuroses recognize each other. Your unresolved issues are attracted to someone else's unresolved issues like puzzle pieces clicking together. The fit feels perfect because it is perfect for maintaining your neurosis, not for actually being happy. Freud treated countless patients who complained about their partners while unconsciously choosing the exact type of person guaranteed to recreate their childhood wounds. A woman with an abusive father dated abusive men. A man with a smothering mother dated controlling women. They weren't unlucky, they were neurotic, and their neurosis had an agenda. Here's the truly disturbing part. When these people encountered healthy, available partners, they felt nothing. Or worse, they felt repulsion. Too nice, too boring, no spark. Translation, this person won't help me act out my neurosis. A healthy partner can't participate in your unconscious drama, so your neurosis rejects them. This explains why therapy often temporarily ruins your love life. As you become more aware of your patterns, you lose attraction to your usual type. But you haven't yet developed attraction to healthy people. You're stuck in a void, mourning the loss of that addictive dysfunction while finding stable people incredibly dull. Freud believed most people never escape this trap. They spend their entire lives cycling through variations of the same neurotic relationship, each time believing this is the one, while their unconscious laughs at the predictability. The neurosis doesn't want to be healed, it wants to be fed, and you keep serving it exactly what it craves.
So here's the question that matters. Are you doomed? Did your childhood script your entire romantic life with no possibility of rewrite? Freud's answer was complicated and not particularly optimistic, but it wasn't hopeless either. Freud believed that making the unconscious conscious was the only path to freedom. You can't change patterns you don't see. The first step is brutal honesty about your relationship history. Not the story you tell yourself about bad luck or wrong timing, the real pattern. Write down every significant relationship. What attracted you? How did it end? What role did you play? You'll see the repetition staring back at you like a confession. Next, you have to trace those patterns back to their origin. This is painful work. It means examining your childhood not as you wish it had been, but as it actually was. Maybe your parents weren't terrible, but they were absent. Maybe they loved you, but conditionally. Those early relationships created your template. Understanding them doesn't excuse your current choices, but it explains them. Then comes the hardest part, sitting with the discomfort of breaking the pattern. When you meet someone who doesn't trigger your usual neurotic response, your entire system will scream that something is wrong. That absence of anxiety will feel like absence of love. You'll be tempted to run back to the chaos. This is where most people fail. They mistake peace for boredom and trade growth for familiar pain. Freud was honest about the odds. Most people, he believed, would rather remain neurotic than do the excruciating work of change. It's easier to blame your partners, call it bad luck, and keep repeating the cycle. Self-awareness is painful. It means facing the ways you've been complicit in your own suffering. But here's what Freud also knew. Awareness changes everything. Once you see your patterns, you can't unsee them. You might still feel the pull toward the wrong people, but now you'll recognize it for what it is. Not destiny, but compulsion. Not love, but repetition. And in that recognition, choice becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. And maybe that's the most honest form of hope there is.